Well, hello there. Welcome back to another episode of Metal Friday. Last time around, I talked about Judas Priest. I reviewed and ranked all of their studio records. If you haven't seen that video, please do check it out. Today, I'm not talking about any particular band or their discography. I'm talking about five records that many people consider as bad, terrible records, and records that I actually do like, and some of them even love. And the first album I'm going to talk about are actually two albums, Load and Reload by Metallica from 1996 and 1997, respectively, considered by many fans as their worst records alongside Saint Anger. I'm not going to defend Saint Anger, that album deserves its spot as Metallica's worst record by far. But Load and Reload, on the other hand, are actually pretty solid records for what they are. Yes, I know fans were furious when these two albums were released. They were furious that Metallica doesn't sound like Metallica anymore. They're not trashy anymore. They cut their hair short, they changed their style, and people were pissed. And I get that, that's fine. But these two records did not deserve the hate they get. I think they're fine for what they are. Metallica just followed the trend of the 90s, mid 90s. Thrash metal wasn't big around that time. Metal scene and metal in general was shifting, it was changing. It was all about the grooves, it was all about down-tuned guitars. Bands like Fate No More, Pantera were popular alongside more new metal that was on the rise around that time. So Metallica just tagged along and tried to make something of it, to make their own thing. And for the most part, I think they did a pretty solid job. Of course, there are a bunch of embarrassing moments and a bunch of filler tracks. And if you would combine the best parts of Load and best parts of Reload, I think they would make a great release. But unfortunately, they went with this route, so they're 27 songs. It's way too much. Load has 14, Reload has 13, but some of these songs could be trimmed down completely. Some of them need to be shorter, but even like that, I think they're fine. Especially Load, I think Load is pretty solid, especially songs like Until It Sleeps, King Nothing. Reload, on the other hand, we have the great opening track of Fuel, which is, lyric wise, it's kind of lame, but it's a fun song. Then we have songs like more slow paced, more moodier, more brooding songs on, especially on Reload. Because Load still contained that old Metallica DNA. I think they lost that completely on Reload. So it just showcased the band's ability to write more slow-paced, more melodic songs, more brooding songs, especially like Where the Wild Things Are or Fixer. And I especially love the use of strings on songs like Low Man's Lyrics, one of the highlights from Reload for me. Overall, if you're not a fan of extreme metal like thrash metal and you like classic hard rock, this is actually a pretty good album, both of them, both Load and Reload. So I don't see any problem with any of these two records. They made something different. So overall, I like both of these records. I like listening to them. I have Load on CD, and I would rather listen to these two than any other new Metallica album. To tell you the truth, their attempt to making another Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning, that's impossible. Same thing with Megadeth as well. And I'm going to get over to Megadeth soon enough. But yeah, I think both Load and Reload are underappreciated and overhated. I think they're both pretty solid releases. This next album is by a band I already mentioned previously on my latest video. It is Paradise Lost and their album from 1999 called Host. Following the success of 1 Second, Paradise Lost ended their ties with Music for Nation label and signed for EMI, releasing their seventh overall studio album, Host. This album divided the fans, and many hated it mostly because they didn't sound like old Paradise Lost. Looking at the cover artwork, band members having short hair and in suits tells you a lot what to expect from this record, and fans did not like that one bit. So we have a similar situation as with Metallica. 1 Second showcased a more different side of the band, a more radio friendly sound full of catchy melodies. Host is basically death but cranked to 11. Guitars are overshadowed by electronics, keyboards, and strings, to many fans' surprise. This album sounds more like a Depeche Mode, similar sound to Ultra or U2's Pop even. Vocally, this might be Nick Holmes' best vocal performance. He continued in similar fashion as on 1 Second. His singing is emotional and completely different from his more growly style of older Paradise Lost records. Host is a subdued album, albeit an ambitious effort by the band, full of interesting moments, especially on the first half of the record. So Much Lost is a melodic, catchy tune with nice string arrangements. Where Nick shines the most are more atmospheric tracks, more slower tracks on the second half of the record, like Wreck, the title track, and Deep. His voice elevates the tracks to a whole new level, and if you like Ultra by Depeche Mode or Pop by U2, I think you'll like this one as well. Even though it is by a metal band, this doesn't sound anything like it. It doesn't sound like Paradise Lost, or it's not even metal. It's completely different style of music, and I think they did a great job in, capturing that sound. Hated by many, I always loved it. It was one of the first Paradise Lost albums I actually bought on CD. I still have it. I still like listening to it, and I think it's overhated and really underrated. It is dark, it is brooding record, it's atmospheric, it pulls you in. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I think this album will actually be something you would like. This next one I'm going to talk about is by another British band, this time around an extreme metal band called Cradle of Filth and their seventh studio album Tornography from 2006. When this was released, people were not happy with it. Critics actually did like this album, but fans were pissed, not happy one bit. I mean, Cradle of Filth already started to dabble with more approachable sound, even on their previous releases like Nymphetamine and Damnation in the Day, especially Nymphetamine. On Damnation in the Day, they wanted to do a more orchestral kind of thing. It was a big album. It was an ambitious project, albeit it's you know way too long. But I find that album actually quite enjoyable as well, even though it's not highly regarded by fans. But this one, on the other hand, is considered by many fans as by far their worst record. And to me, it wasn't. I remember my friend who was all into Cradle of Filth hated this album, hated it so much he was kind of lost all hope about the band. I was like, okay, you do you, but to me, this album was just a natural progression from 2004 Nymphetamine. It is by far the most accessible Cradle of Filth record, an album you can actually understand what Danny Filth is singing about. Tornography is focused, it is melodic, it is catchy and accessible metal record. The band really shines through. It is full of melodic guitar leads, orchestral arrangements, and some really good guitar solos as well. I like when bands try new thing, breaking the rules and exploring different styles and different genres. Sonically, this album still retains that recognizable Cradle of Filth sound, but with more elements added to it. To me, this is an experiment done right. They took the elements from Nymphetamine and done it even better here. The riffs are really melodic, almost Maiden-esque, like on songs Tonight in Flames or Cemetery and Sundown, or The Fetus of the New Day Kicking as well. There are a couple of guest musicians here, like on The Byronic Man, we have Billy Vallow from him. I think that's one of the highlights from the record as well. This album is really rhythmical and, in a way, especially on some of the songs, it's quite trashy as well, like on Libertina Grimm, for example. The only song I wasn't crazy about is the cover song, um, Heaven 17 cover or Temptation. I found that song kind of annoying, but other than that, I think this is a fine record, and I was happy they tried to do something new, something different. You can see they put some effort and there was passion in making these songs. So this is what I like about music. I mean, when bands try to do something new, something different, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Of course, it is not my favorite Cradle of Filth record. It is not maybe top tier Cradle of Filth, but it's still fine, an enjoyable record, and I don't get the hate as well. So yes, Pornography, I recommend this album as well. I think it's a pretty solid release by the band. Okay, now we have another British band, but this time around it's a big one. It is Iron Maiden. Yes, I'm going to talk about No Prayer for the Dying, one of the more underrated Iron Maiden records in my opinion and unjustly hated by fans. This is a back to basic album from Iron Maiden following a ambitious and slightly proggy record of Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. It's more of a hard rock album than anything else, straightforward, catchy, similar to their first two records. Even the cover artwork is back to basics Eddie. It was the first album to feature Yannick Gers, who replaced Adrian Smith on guitars, and unfortunately, that is kind of felt. I do like Yannick, but I think Adrian Smith was a big part of Iron Maiden, and of course it still is. But his presence it was always felt on all of the Maiden records. He was, involved in the songwriting process. I think Yannick did a pretty solid job here, especially for this kind of sound they were going for. He even played already with Bruce on his debut record, Tattooed Millionaire, who was in a way similar to No Prayer for the Dying, albeit a little more on hard rock spectrum. This one is still retaining heavy metal. My biggest complaint for this record is maybe the production. It was produced in home studio. I don't know, something is missing here, even though it was produced by Martin Birch, who already produced all of the previous classic Iron Maiden records, but something is missing here. Even though the dirtier texture, dirtier sound kind of fits some of the songs here, overall, it is a step down to marvelously produced records that came before it. Tail Gunner is a super fun opener, a more traditional hard rock kind of tune. Bruce's voice is more raspier in verses throughout this record, something he'll continue to do on his solo album Tattooed Millionaire and Fear of the Dark as well. Holy Smoke is another song following that similar hard rock sound. It's, kind of cheesy in a way, but fun cheesy. It's a fun song. No Prayer for the Dying and Mother Russia are tracks that I feel like are more aligned to 80s Iron Maiden, both really solid and memorable. I especially love the layback sound of No Prayer for the Dying. It always brings a smile up on my face. Mother Russia, while a good song, underrated maybe even, feels a bit out of place on this album, especially as a closer. It sounds nothing like the rest of the record. It tries to capture more proggier, complex sound of some of their previous records, but it is not as successful as some of the classics, but I still find that song pretty solid. Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter might be the most well known song from this album, a song that Bruce Dickinson wrote for his solo album and was featured on Night on Elm Street soundtrack. It is a fun song, but it never was one of my favorite Iron Maiden songs. Public Enema number one is actually a really solid song with horrendous title. Really? Public Enema? Ugh, no words for it. Solid song, terrible name. Overall, while not even close to classic Iron Maiden stuff, I don't think this album deserves the hate it gets. I think over the years, uh, even the Blaze Bailey era stuff gets more praise than No Prayer for the Dying, which is, I don't know, I feel this album is unjustly hated just because they return, doing back to basic stuff. The last album I'm going to talk about today is Risk by Megadeth. Their 1999 release, an album that is so hated by fans, it is often considered as their worst record by far. And this album shares a similar fate of Metallica's Load and Reload. And I disagree, of course. And I can't wait for my Megadeth rankings video just for you to see how I appreciate this record. This album is called Risk for a reason. They, as Metallica in mid 90s, they followed the trend. They tried to make more accessible music, more radio friendly stuff. And for the most part, I think Megadeth did a better job overall in the 90s, especially with albums like Countdown to Extinction, Euthanasia, and Cryptic Writings. Cryptic Writing sales were pretty good, so they continued with that similar sound and making this one even more accessible and commercial sounding. It is a hard rock, classic rock album, nothing to do with classic Megadeth sound, and I can definitely see why many Megadeth fans hated this on release. Is this a terrible record? Well, I don't think it is. I think it's a pretty solid record, to be honest. I like it, and this album just shows how good Dave Mustaine is in writing melodic hooks and catchy choruses. He has a strong grasp on music composition, and Risk is full of melodic hooks and memorable moments. The only song here that has that old school Megadeth vibe is Prince of Darkness and Kill the King, which is actually not included on the original release of an album. It's standalone single, but it was recording during that time, and that's the only two songs that are more heavier. The others are way different. This is the first and only album to feature Jimmy DeGrasso on drums, and I think he did a good job replacing Nick Menza, and I think he's actually an underrated drummer as well. And I really do love how he played on their live album Rude Awakening from 2001, I think. Uh, Insomnia is a song that has an industrial dark tone, same as Doctor is Calling. Breadline is almost like a pop song, catchy chorus, and Mustaine actually tries to sing on it. Wanderlust is my favorite song from this record, and it's a cross between a Fleetwood Mac song and Bon Jovi. I almost hear Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi on this one, but I do love Wanderlust more. Crush 'em is a funny little track with its almost disco bass sound in the beginning, kind of an arena rock type of song with a sing-along chorus and that hilariously bad music video with Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's great stuff. Great stuff. I don't know. I never understood. I mean, I understood, but I think this album is actually pretty solid. I mean, it's not a terrible Megadeth release. To tell you the truth, you will see when I do Megadeth, but this album is better than some of the stuff they're doing now. I will say that much. This album doesn't deserve the hate it gets because I think Mustaine really tried to make almost a pop record here and almost succeeded. If this wasn't a Megadeth record and it was named, I know, something else, I think this album would be much more appreciated than it actually is. So this is my list of 5 records that many consider as bad records, but I actually do like them. So if you have that similar list, or you have some albums that are often considered as bad and you do actually like them, please share that with me in comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, and all of that good YouTube jabs. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.